This week, a couple of my neighbors shared a photo that kind of was rolling around in my mind as I was thinking about today's worship. And the photo was of two vehicles that they own, and one was a shiny silver Airstream trailer, and it was pointed due west. And the other was their family car, packed and loaded down with, you could see all their personal items, clothes, and it was pointed due east. And my neighbors, the reason they have this Airstream trailer is that they have some property up in Paso Robles, and their hope is to one day retire up there and on building a cabin that they can one day retire in. And I hope to be a good enough friend that they'll take me with them, right? Let's all retire to Paso Robles. And so there's a saying that life is what happens when you're making other plans, right? Maybe you have felt that way in your life at times. And so in the midst of them dreaming about retiring in a few years to Paso Robles, my neighbor lost his job. And it was a big deal, as it would be for most of us if we lost our job. And he looked and looked and looked and looked, and 6 months later, still didn't have a job. And then all of a sudden, he got hired by a company in New York City. And so now, instead of spending weekends in Paso Robles, that car packed to the gills and headed due east, they'll be moving out to New York City sometime this summer. And so I'm wondering, do any of you resonate with that symbolism of those two cars pointed in separate directions? Yeah, I do, definitely. And, at times it feels like we're living with sort of our yearnings of what we hope life is, or yearnings of how we hope we'll be over here on this hand. But then we have our other hand totally attached to us. It's the reality of where we're living right now. And so maybe you're thinking that you're definitely ready to retire. That's this hand, your hopeful hand. But then on the other one, the reality is, man, I have to keep working. Or maybe you, on this hand, like your life is pulling you out into the throngs of people living a really active and engaged and busy life. But you have this hand, which keeps saying, slow down. I don't want to be out there with all those people. I want to live the life of a contemplative in Paso Robles with Tera's neighbors. I'm going to their cabin. They're gone to New York City, you guys. It's ours. I'll get the address. Or maybe you're in a really beautiful, loving relationship and you're reaping all the benefits of that, and yet you can still remember those days when it was only you and you decided what time to go to bed and you decided what you were going to eat for dinner and you decided when to go up to your cabin in Paso Robles and how long to stay, right? I can see that that's resonating with some of you. This month, we're focused on the idea of vital virtues in worship. And we're asking ourselves, what are the highest ideals that are central to who we are as Throop Unitarian Universalist? Not the ideals that you may hold as an individual, but what are some of the ideals that we hold in common? As your ministry team explores these virtues, we're actually not just reaching into thin air for these ideas. The ideas came from you. This past winter, your board conducted a series of small group conversations to uncover and define the important aspects of Throop to you. How many of you were able to participate in some of those small group discussions? Yes, you get a star on the bulletin board in my office. So as the board and ministry team looked over your comments, we noted that when we talk about going out and loving the world, we're not only talking about going out and loving the world out there, but we're talking about loving the world in here, and we're talking about loving the world in here, in our hearts. We can only love the world out there by first learning how to love our own whole selves, as messy and as complex as we know them to be. And at Throop, we want to nurture the very best in you, and we want you to practice, we want you to encourage living wholehearted lives. And so each of you holds ideas about what it means to be virtuous or what it means to have high ideals or moral standards. For some of you, that highest ideal is a compassion for all of life. For others, it's being mindful of your ecological footprint. For others of you, it's that you're able to care and nurture for small children or for vulnerable adults in your lives. And most of you carry strongly held beliefs that guide you through your thoughts and actions each day. And if you remember back to our story for all ages told by Melanie and Steve, you'll remember that we encountered two monks, each living out their beliefs in different ways, right? So one held a very high belief in helping other people. The other held a high value of following the rules. And so would you say that both of those monks were very virtuous people? Yeah, they were. Though we might not approve of how their morals actually got lived out in the real world. And so while we can't be in direct relationship with that particular monk who follows the rules to the letter, I like to think that just like his comrade, that the rules-following monk also values compassion for all life, and that in that instance by the river, he may have felt very pulled in two directions, hence his later anger at his friend for making the kinder choice. So what's a virtue that you feel guides you in your everyday living? What's a virtue that you feel like is kind of a guiding light in your life? I'll invite you to just take a moment and think of what that virtue is. And when DJ is ready, I'll know the rest of you are ready. Do you have your virtue? Oh, no, yet. Okay, he's ready. So I'm going to ask you to do something a little risky. I know the introverts are like, uh-oh. I know, I'd be there too, friends. So I'm going to ask you to just turn to someone near you and to share briefly that belief that is a guiding light in your life. So turn to a neighbor and share briefly the value that's a guiding light for you. You're going to hear it. DJ just asked me what's mine. And since I have the pulpit, guess what comes next? Yeah. So on Earth Day Sunday, I invited each of you to take a challenge of your choice. For 1 week to change one behavior that could heal and bring peace to some aspect of planet Earth. So how many of you opted in for the challenge that day? DJ. All right, a few of you did. And then how many of you carried it out through that whole week after Earth Day, that you stuck with it? Awesome. And how many of you are still doing it? Yeah, all right, thank you. So as you may remember, my personal challenge was to not take any single-use plastic for the week. None. It was actually fun, and it was relatively easy for me to do. And the reason it was fun and easy for me to do is that I have a lifestyle and social location that kind of lent itself to that. So I'm able-bodied, so for me to carry extra things around and to go out of my way if needed was no problem. I actually liked getting the extra steps on my Fitbit. And I don't have any small children to take care of, so I didn't have any plastic throwaway things that sometimes come with young children or older people that might be in my care. And I live in Pasadena, where there's tons of fresh fruits and vegetables, if only you know where to go to look for them. So I dove into this challenge with gusto, and I'm very competitive with myself. So I was like, I'm in it to win it, my friends. It's mine. So I took my ceramic mug everywhere, and I never had to take a plastic cup, not even on the airplane, because I took my ceramic cup. I know. And I asked the flight attendant so nicely, I said, I'm taking a plastic challenge. Could I please have the whole can of sparkling water? And they gave it to me. I got the whole can. I wasn't thirsty when I got off the plane. I tucked reusable containers into my shopping bags so I could be very virtuous at the bulk bins, at the stores that have bulk bins. And I got this cool bamboo utensil set that I could clip onto something and carry it around in case I found myself in need of a non-plastic set of utensils. So it actually became like a video game to me. I scored invisible points every time I turned down a plastic non-reusable item. And I lost invisible points every time I had to take one, like this past week at the Huntington when they sneaked in a plastic cup of salsa onto my lunch plate. Oh, I couldn't believe it. So soon as saying no to plastic, though, it wasn't enough. I got greedy with my challenge. And by week 3, I proclaimed to my household, we are going to cut out almost all the trash we generate. You are not to bring anything into our home that we cannot reuse, compost, or recycle. And this is our new trash container. Well, I had some pairs of very big eyes responding to my proclamation. And my husband Jonathan very innocently asked me, really, what are you going to do about hosting the newcomer social next week? Are you not going to buy any vegan cheese, he says, that comes wrapped in plastic? What are you going to do if a guest comes and they bring you something wrapped in plastic, or they bring something that you'll need to put in the trash can? What are you going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do about that. I wasn't really sure. In my mind, I briefly imagined the email I would craft in which I lovingly, nurturingly, kindly ask people not to bring anything into our house lest it end up in my trash can. Are you like, please don't send me that email? And then I thought about the people for whom bringing food or wine or flowers or something is a cultural norm, and it's a way for them to extend their own kindness back to me. And I realized that I might be asking them to stamp down one of their own virtues for the sake of my own. My conundrum reminded me of one of my favorite poems by Yehuda Amichai, The Place Where We Are Right, and it may sound familiar. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. My new no trash virtue may unintentionally create a hard and trampled welcome mat, when really my intention is to create a warm and loving embrace for all who come through my door. I feel like those two cars in my friend's picture, the two competing virtues pointing in opposite directions. I'm all for having ethical practices and sticking to them. And I'm also all for compassionate connections with the people we care about. At Throop, when we talk about deepening our capacity for wholehearted living and honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all, including, yes, ourselves, what we don't want is for our personal virtues to become an almost aggressive or toxic individualism, in which our personal beliefs overpower our ability to nurture and maintain long-lasting relationships. As we continue to discern what it means for us at Throop to go out and love the world and loving what we find in here, by naming what is important to us, we'll also need to develop a healthy humility within ourselves to balance those virtues we carry. And by healthy humility, I mean that we acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. Some truth lies in me with my reusable things. Some truth lies in you and the choices you make in your own lives. Healthy humility acknowledges that even when our truths are shared, you too may have these reusables, that the way you live out your truth may look and feel a little differently from the way I live mine out. And healthy humility means that whatever truths we do carry, I remind you to be thankful and grateful for what we already have in this world. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm advocating a moral relativism that anything goes as long as you believe it. Rather, that each of us holds a piece, and through careful conversation and sharing, by telling our story and listening deeply to someone else's, that we're able to grasp a fuller understanding of ourselves, the sacred, and each other. As we heard from my colleague Sunshine Wolf earlier in the service, we're creating not a faith that requires perfection or rightness in one another, rather a faith of shared imperfection that we may learn to stumble and fall together, faith that we will help one another to rise and try again and again and again. There is no virtuous self all alone. At different times in our lives, we carry one another across the river. May we continue to lean on each other. Amen. And let us sing our closing hymn, 1021, Lean on Me.